Ladies and gentlemen, the Wheel of Time show is here, and thank God it didn't look like a CW show. Amazon decided to drop the first 3 episodes all at once, so I'll split this into 3 different videos. This first one will be episode 1, plus non-spoilers for everything we saw to kick it off. Not gonna lie, it started off a little rough. The first cold opening scene is not what you needed to kick off the series. There's a prologue in The Eye of the World, the first book, that I would have loved to have it start with, but instead it started with a scene that could definitely throw people new to the series off and make them a little bit wary about what they're actually watching. Luckily, the second half of episode 1, along with episodes 2 and 3, are much better paced and have less awkward scenes in the wrong places. It really is just the start of that first episode, and then establishing a few necessary components for the latter half of episode 1, which is completely necessary because this world is massive and there's a ton of things to get down. The small details that add on to something later on that you won't even pick up at first, but it'll be in the back of your head and be like, oh yeah, I remember that. And those all get kind of established in that first half. And it makes it a little bit more rough to sit through than the other 2.5 hours that Amazon released. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, we can talk about set design and visuals. You can tell Amazon spent a lot of money on this. In the creatures that are CGI, it looks good about 85% of the time, and that 15% is really just movement where they're not the focus. But when they're in focus or a major part of the scene, it ends up looking really good, like they spent a movie budget on it instead of just a television show budget. The second thing I'm really glad they're doing is they're not stepping away from the gore and the darkness of the story. Now, this isn't grimdark fantasy where everything's depressing, and a lot of people will compare it to Game of Thrones because that is the most prevalent fantasy TV series, but what they do is they have their own blend, as Wheel of Time does, of darkness within the world. In one of the episodes, you just straight up see a pair of hands cut off sitting on a chopping block, just casually. Or when they're fighting monsters, like there is blood going everywhere. There's guts being ripped out. It's tastefully done, so it's not the main focus of it, but it's there. Unlike in Star Wars, when somebody chops somebody with a lightsaber and their head doesn't come off or something. Like, it is what would realistically happen in the situation. It is not too self-indulgent and it is not too PG. I think they found a really good balance to add realism to the world while also keeping it from making you want to throw up. As for the actors, I think they all do a really good job. I haven't really had a complaint performance-wise. In directing, I have a few questions about the way they're taking some of them, as their behaviors don't exactly match up perfectly with the books, but that's all right because it's not going to be the exact same. They've changed a good amount of things, but overall the vibes of the characters match, and the actors embody them pretty well. The standout is definitely the actor for Matt, which is so unfortunate because of personal reasons. He has to be recast in season 2. I really hope whatever happens, they figure out his situation so then he can return, because he embodies the characters more than anybody else. Give him all the money, give him all the help. I don't care. Get Jeff Bezos on the phone. Get this man anything he needs to figure out the situation, because he is the perfect casting as Matt. For the book readers, a good amount of stuff has been changed. Now, nothing that would affect the overall plot, as everybody kind of ends up where they're supposed to be, but maybe at later points in time. A good amount of the tertiary characters have had their backgrounds changed to help along the main characters. This, I'm open to seeing how it goes. I'm 50-50 on it. Right now, it is working really well because it is adding the depth that some of them lacked in the beginning, but later on, I'm not sure how it'll totally affect things, as these are not really important characters, but it does shift the dynamic in a couple of the books. Something they're really trying to push for is making the mystery of who the Dragon Reborn a lot more prevalent. They've expanded the options and made it so any one of them could possibly be it, even hinting at some people more than others than who it actually is. Now, I obviously won't spoil it because we are in non-spoilers, but I'd be curious to see, for non-book readers, who you think the Dragon Reborn is going to be. I want to see if they're effectively utilizing the other characters to add this mystery. I'm not sure if this was just my TV or was happening to other people, but the shots would look amazing, the sweeping cinematic shots over the mountains, but then in some of the darker scenes, it'd get a bit grainy, especially with like the embers of the fire floating up. Like, it would get grainy on the faces of the actors. And I don't think it's my TV problem, as I do have a pretty good TV, but let me know about that too. Now, some of the main concerns I have after watching the 3 episodes are, will the CGI quality drop off in the middle, as many shows save their budget for a dynamic start and a great finale? I really hope that they keep it going at this quality, since it is Amazon and you got a lot of fucking money to do it, but there's always a chance that it will drop off, and that'd be disappointing. Now, after episode 3, there's a couple things that haven't been introduced that really add to the world and make these characters' journeys a bit more interesting. And I'm nervous that a couple of the storylines could drop off and become background noise to the more interesting ones if they do not introduce these certain elements. Now, that's the thing that we can't have, is this is a dynamic cast of characters, and you want to be engaged here, wherever they are, whether they're together or they're apart. You need them all to have their own interesting points of view and not really just give all the attention to one group or one person. But at the end of the day, there may be a main character, but that does not mean that they should receive all of the attention, because the other people play such an important part to the Wheel of Time story, and it would make the show very lackluster and shallow compared to the books if they do not keep these characters' plot lines as engaging as the others. Now, I have supreme confidence in them doing it after what I've seen because of the depth they've already added to their backstories, making them more interesting than the book has initially. This gives me great hope, but I hope it continues on throughout the rest of it. Overall, to end non-spoilers, if you're a book fan, you've probably already watched it. If you haven't, go watch it. If you're not a book fan, give it the 3 episodes. As I said, the first episode does have a rough start, but it picks up, and even me, who knows the storyline, was thoroughly engaged. And that isn't just the fan speaking. There are interesting elements that you want to figure out. Now, subscribe if you want to see my other reviews, or come back later to watch the spoiler section, as I am going to get into the details of episode 1 and discuss the specifics of what I liked and didn't like. Alright, for spoilers, we gotta talk about that Red Sister cold opening. Ooh. I had my CW scares heightened to an extreme as they pulled up. And the man is not even Logain, so it doesn't connect. It's just a random male channeler. I did like how they had the apparition of him speaking to himself. But overall, that and then the cut to Moiraine and land on the cliff just was awkward, did not work well, and I wish that they'd at least made that man Logain and at the capturing of Logain, which comes into play later, instead of it just being a random dude. That'd make more sense. But this just ends up being a really bad start to the episode and the series as a whole. What I did like, but could be confusing for some people, is that they did not show the weaves until later on. These women just perform magic. That's how it's going to look like to anybody that does not have access to the one power, or a guy looking at a girl channeling, or vice versa. And I liked how they kind of kept it like, this is scary. This is scary. If you just see a woman whipping an avalanche down, you're going to be like, oh shit, I'm screwed. So there's at least that one positive takeaway from that initially not great scene. And the next 2 things we have is Egwene being recognized as a full-fledged adult by the Women's Circle, and Rand and his dad Tam traveling down to Emond's Field for Beltane. Overall, these scenes are fine, but I do wish that they had included Rand glimpsing the Fade, as that is foreshadowing that adds an eeriness to the beginning of the book, along with the sounds that would later be heard by Nynaeve in the wind. It would have just added this foreboding sense overall. It's not a huge deal, but I would have liked that establishment earlier in the episode, so bit by bit you're like, something's wrong here before the Trollocs attack. Now, once we actually get inside Emond's Field, where they're all celebrating before Beltane, and Egwene comes in and everybody cheers her, that's when the good stuff happens. And you see the friendship between Mat, Rand, and Perrin, which I thought was very realistic and well done. The dialogue did not feel clunky. It actually felt like friends shooting the shit instead of something written by some 50-year-old Hollywood guy that can't remember what it's like to be this age. Now, this is where we start getting into the changes made to the books. Perrin is mentioned to have a wife, and then he goes into his forge and meets Layla. This is completely not in the books, and I 100% support its addition. Now, I wish that they had added either Master Luhan, his forge master, or his family, because that becomes really important at a certain point in book 4. But overall, it was fine, and I think that those things can be addressed later, but I do wish that the family was at least mentioned, because that is important. But Layla is a good addition, and especially what they end up doing during the end helps with Perrin's conscience and his worldview throughout the following books, and hopefully the following seasons of TV. The next thing I gotta praise is Mat. They gave Mat that extra background motivation, but at the cost of making his dad a dick. Through 14 books, Abel Cawthon's maybe mentioned in like 12 pages, but they make him a douchebag when he's really just supposed to be a horse trader who's really good at archery. And I guess it's fine to prop up one of your main characters and show that he is caring for his sisters and his mom's a drunkard, and this makes his situation much worse and validates his decisions later on the series, but I can't help but feeling bad for the way that they did my boy Abel Cawthon. Next on the list to receive some spice from the showrunners is Rand and Egwene. And thank God they put out the outdated way that they had relationships, because this is supposed to be a post-apocalyptic-esque society. If you didn't know, Wheel of Time. So at one point you had modern world, and then you have where we are now, and then there was a cataclysm in between. And so these outdated customs of chivalry that are presented in the books don't work very well. But here, they're hooking up. It's fine. It works. Makes a lot more sense. But the main plot point in there is that Egwene was asked by Nynaeve to become the town's next wisdom. Now, she says that she can't marry, but I don't remember this being the case in the books. But I'm fine with the change because it does add more dynamic to the relationship than them just only being betrothed. This does make both Rand and Egwene sad, but she hasn't accepted yet, but they are both supportive of each other. Rand, I mean, come on, anybody's butthurt if their girlfriend's like, hey, you know what? I'm not gonna be able to be with you, but he does his best at being a supportive, no longer boyfriend, betrothed guy, whatever he is, he's supportive for the most part. But there is definite tension there, and he feels a sense of abandonment. But before Rand and Egwene have their fun, there is one of the most awkward, kind of cringily shot scenes. As everybody's having fun in the tavern, it all quiets down, the wind blows, the doors bust open, and then there's Lan, standing in the worst lighting possible, not looking menacing at all. This is Moiraine. Moiraine walks in. Hello, I have ring. Oh, hi Aes Sedai, what can I do for you? It was just, did not like it at all. They could have at least given my boy Lan some shadows to work with instead of just standing there looking like an idiot with his hood on. And then when Egwene's mom, of which this was not established, but the inn is run by Egwene's parents, the guy with the beard that hugs her when she pops in, not really important, that's her dad, he should be fatter. But when Egwene's mom is like, yes, Moiraine Sedai, it's like, yo, that was like a subtle flash. You're supposed to be like, yeah, I get it, and move on. And also, they do not use fake identities. In the books, there is fake identities, and this adds to a slight problem in the way that the stakes play out in the coming battle, as these people should not know that they have an Aes Sedai there, so when Moiraine pulls up and starts chucking fireballs and lightning, it's a lot more impactful when you're like, oh shit, we're getting slaughtered by Trollocs, wait a minute, we might survive. But instead, she's just presented as this, and the suspicions of the town people are essentially ignored instead of being a factor that they have to deal with and avoid to remain conspicuous. Keeping on track with Moiraine, we'll go to the scene where Moiraine and Nynaeve kind of have their back and forth, and you can see Nynaeve's suspicion in the Aes Sedai and her protectiveness of her friends. Now this is good, but what I need is angrier Nynaeve. She needs more snappish. You aren't supposed to really like her until later. She is kind of likable because she's being super logical. And the dynamic with Nynaeve in the books is that she is right, but she goes about it the wrong way. But she's presented as kind of very logical in this situation. But I do like their back and forth. They both get their barbs in. There are a couple things that Moiraine says that are changes from the books, but add to the story and also make it a bit shallower. Something that adds to the story is the changing of Nynaeve's background. Now, I won't get into specifics for spoiler reasons, but I do like this and it adds to the mystery more. Those who have read the books, you'll probably agree with me. Something I don't like, and it's just a tiny nitpick, is the way that they talk about how the Dragon Reborn prophecy was given from like a blind Aes Sedai. No, it wasn't. You're removing some of the depth and intrigue that comes from the prequel book and later plot lines that become really important to the final battle. You could have easily just replaced the word blind woman with keeper. It's not a huge deal. It is a nitpick, but I do think it is removing that one little layer of depth that a plot line that will happen years from now will have. Something that isn't a nitpick and does significantly impact the way things are presented is that the old wisdom was turned out of the tower because of her being a peasant. No. The White Tower is about power rankings, not status. They don't care about status. You'll see later in the training of the White Tower, status is not a thing that they care a single bit about. It's all about how powerful you are. And so if she had made the qualifications, she would not have been turned away. So this change is not sitting well for me. I think that the superiority that they're trying to establish with the Reds is leaking through with the rest of the tower, and I'm not really here for it, and it changes the way that things work fundamentally. Just one small anecdote about Padan Fain. Oh, perfect casting. Like, I don't want to like make fun of a guy's appearance, but like his smile, That was just disgustingly perfect for who Pat Fane was. And then Matt pulling up and selling the bracelet he stole, which you're thinking, wow, dickhead. But then you figure out it's for his sister's lanterns, and you're like, makes me feel bad for you and like struggling to do this. Like, he is a conniving little shit, but at the same time, he does have a heart of gold. Somebody who does not appear is my boy Tom Maryland. Now, just rest assured, he has been cast, so he will appear, but I won't talk about him anymore for spoiler reasons. All right, and we finally made it to bell time. Everybody's dancing, everybody's having a good time. Rand and Tam went home to have some quiet time and light the lantern for Rand's mom. And then the Trollocs attack. And when Egwene's dancing with that one guy and he just catches it in the chest. And for the next couple things, as everything is blurry and panicked and shaky cams, it works well because it's told from the perspective of the villagers and they're panicking. They don't know what's going on. Then it switches to Moiraine and Lan and they are calm and the camera steadies. It's just the subtle things that add to the moment. Now Moiraine is weaving. You are able to see the weaves as compared to before because it's technically told from her perspective in a show point of view. In the chaos, Nynaeve is ripped away by a Trolloc and Egwene is just left there screaming and panicking. I like how she does not go after her. She retreats and then once her mom finds her, she like kind of makes a panic to go after her. But nobody's chasing down a fucking Trolloc by yourself with no skill in weapons or even having a weapon in your hand. It's realistic, and I'm glad they didn't go with that stupid ass hero trope of I'll save you, and then she somehow manages to defeat it. Nynaeve getting carried off? Unexpected. What the fuck? Intrigued. Okay, now Moiraine and Lan have entered the action. I love their choreography and how they work together as their minds are linked, but Lan does look a little bit funky in these wide angle shots. I think when he has his individual battles later on, it'll look a lot more like Tam's fight against the Trolloc in Rand's house. But a problem I did have is the way that they displayed Moraine's magic system. Not in visual terms, but in the terms of how it affects the story and the way people perceive power. In the books, there's something called a saw-angreal, or it is essentially a power booster. Steroids for magicians. She pulls it out, she can boost her levels at the cost of herself later. Instead, she just does this Super Saiyan power-up and says, I'll just try harder to kill the Trollocs, and it works. Now, the magic system in Wheel of Time isn't exactly a hard magic system. There aren't set rules, but there are guidelines and limits that you can kind of place in your mind, and without the inclusion of the saw-angreal, it kind of makes Moraine's power seem a bit limitless at this point, even after she's hurt. During the Trolloc invasion, both Matt and Perrin get scenes that add to their characters and give them more investment into the story as a whole. Matt is seen going out and trying to find his sisters, putting himself in danger, showing he cares about something more than himself. This gives him more investment in the coming storyline than just being suspicious of Moiraine. And Perrin is desperately fighting in his forge with his wife Layla, where he ends up murdering her. Oh my god, I was not expecting this. I'm like, how are they going to play out with this new character? Is she going to be part of the group that moves on? Nope. Perrin kills her, and this is so good and horrible. I feel weird rooting for the death of Perrin's wife, but it adds more credence to the struggles that he goes through as a character and the fear that he will end up hurting somebody because he is a big, powerful man. This just makes me so excited for farther plot lines of Perrin being scared of himself and hurting the people around him. Ooh, a great addition. Brutal, but great. I'm sorry you had to die, Layla, but for my boy Perrin and some painful character development, your death was worth it. To round out the trio of boys, we have Rand back home lighting a lantern for his mom along with Tam. And that was a very heartfelt moment, and when they go back inside, it's quiet. And then the door bursts open, and then the Trolloc comes in, and he's rampaging. Tam stabs him with the spear, and they're going at it, but eventually Tam goes for his sword. And I was a little disappointed in this. If you don't know, Tam is supposed to be really good with the sword. I won't expand upon that for spoiler reasons. But he just felt like he was not very effective. And yes, it has been years since he has picked up that sword. And he is rusty. But this is such ingrained muscle memory. He definitely should have killed Narg inside book joke way quicker than he did. And he is supposed to get injured. And that is not as big of a deal of what they left out next. What happens next in the book is Rand has to drag Tam into town on a sled as he is injured and the Trolloc poison is making him delirious. And this is brutal for Rand, and I'm disappointed they didn't include it. And I definitely get why they didn't include it, as it does affect some of the things they're trying to set up. But I wish there had been some semblance of it in there, because it is an impactful and traumatizing scene to have. And oof, that would have been so good. Something I found a little bit goofy but was fine was when all of the villagers came together and like killed that one Trolloc, and that old lady had like, "I'll give you something to eat" or whatever line. Like, whatever. It was a little campy, but like it wasn't to the point where I was physically cringing. It was just like, oh, okay, I guess. You could have just shown him kill him without the line. I don't know. Tiny nitpick. Moving on. The next day, everybody is miserable, as you would expect. Everybody that they loved, or about 50% of who they love, is murdered. Rand comes into town with Tam, and Moiraine luckily is there to heal him, but Moiraine is gassed. She is done. She is injured. She's been doing this all night. She is gassed. This shows the limitations of the one power. As I was talking about earlier, it does seem like her abilities are infinite, but at least here they show that she is getting extremely fatigued, even if it wasn't in the moment of battle. Now, I really like the moment they played where Perrin finally comes out late after everybody's been there for hours, carrying the body of his dead wife. He finally got the courage to come out with his guilt and lay her down next to the rest of the dead. And oh, when Matt rushes over at him and he's talking, he's like, "I'm so sorry," and it's his fault. Like, you can feel the pain inside of him. In one of my trailer reactions, I talked about, damn, it looks like Perrin's going through a lot. Well, he kind of is. It makes sense now. Now we reach the crux of the episode. Moiraine is like, "Look, one of y'all's the Dragon Reborn. There's a Trolloc army coming down. We gotta get the hell out of here now." And this I have a problem with. Moiraine used a secret identity, so when she revealed herself as an Aes Sedai in the books, everybody mistrusted her, no matter how many people she saved, no matter how many people she healed. And instead of including the amazing speech she has and why they can't tell their parents, why they've got to leave in secrecy, why they've got to go now, they just use Trolloc army, gotta go or else you all die. Let's get the hell out of here. It essentially invalidates the point of why the Shadow Spawn would avoid Emond's Field and why they would actually believe her and move on. It was essentially just, "Oh, I didn't actually convince you. You're just gonna die if you stay here. Let's leave." So that was a little bit iffy, but the end goal was the same and it was accomplished. And episode 1 ends with the crew leaving Emond's Field. Overall, despite the rough start, I give this episode a 7 out of 10.
Okay, actually I'm dropping it to a 6. I was being a little bit overzealous as I just watched it and was super excited to see the TV show. But this episode does have its problems, so it's gonna be a 6. Above average, because for my rating scale, 5 is an average, but it still had a lot of things it could improve upon. Back to old me.
Because you've got a lot to establish. You fumbled it in some places, but you got the characters moving where they were supposed to be, along with adding stuff better than the books into there, making these characters deeper, giving them more motivation to be invested in the plot. I thought they did a great job. It's not the best, but it's not the worst, and I'm excited to see what comes more. I already watched episodes 2 and 3, and I can tell you, they're improvements. Like and subscribe if you enjoy. I'll be back with episode 2 and 3 reviews soon. Bye.